I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Sonoma County Commission on Human Rights. I'm going to start by asking, first of all, I'm going to start by asking that all of our commissioners put on and leave on their microphones while always remembering that your microphones are on. I'm going to go around the table, and since we do have a great deal on our agenda tonight, I'm going to ask our commissioners to simply give us their names and the district they represent. Gail, would you like to start?
Gail Jonas, 4th District.
Ramon Meraz, 5th District.
Jenny Chamberlain, 4th District.
Christopher Karofsky, 5th District.
Faith Ross, 2nd District.
And Zimmer, 3rd District.
Howard Warner, 3rd District.
And Chris Rohde, 2nd District.
Demetra Smith, 1st District.
Judy Wright, 5th District.
Gabriel Baum, 1st District. Sam Salmon, 4th District.
Thank you all. First item is our consent calendar. I'm going to ask if commissioners have any revisions to our agenda or to the draft minutes from our January 17th meeting. If there are any revisions, please state them. Otherwise, I will entertain a motion for approval of both documents.
Move. Both documents.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Good. All right, I'd like to start with a couple of comments before we come to a public comment section. I will tell you first of all that we offer at the Commission 3 opportunities for the public to participate. The first will come up in just a moment or two, and that is we welcome your comments on non-agendized items. Non-agendized items. As we move through our agenda, we will always offer you an opportunity to comment on the proceedings as we work through them on our agenda. Finally, at the end of our meeting, we will offer one additional opportunity for the public to comment on anything they would like to comment on. I do want to say a couple of other things. We have a relatively large crowd tonight. We welcome your comments. We welcome your passion. We welcome what you have to say to us. We have topics that may invoke some passion. That's a good thing. I thought a great deal this week about one of my heroes, who is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And one of the things that he said was, I'm going to ask you all please to be quiet. Thank you. One of the things that Dr. King said was, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. I believe that very strongly, and it is in that spirit and with that intention that we welcome you here tonight. We will be limiting the time that the public has to speak, and I will make all of those limits known for each section. It will depend on how many people want to speak. I'm going to request the following. I'm going to ask that as people are speaking, you listen to them as we do, with respect and in silence. No booing, no cheering, no comments, no disruption. I fully anticipate that that is what will happen. It is in the spirit of what we do here, and it shows respect not only for this commission, but for the people who are speaking and for the members of the public who are here. But let me also make this very clear. If those rules are not adhered to, I will not hesitate to shut down this meeting. Having said that, we're going to begin with comments on non-agendized items. In order for me to determine a length of time, could I just see a quick show of hands of people people who would like to speak on non-agendized items? Okay, well that's easy. In that case, I'm going to give people 3 minutes. So, I will welcome any of you, if you'd like to come up here. We ask for the record that you give us your name, but you are under no obligation to do so if you do not wish to. Demetra here is our timer, and she will hold up probably a 2-minute and a 1-minute, or a 1-minute and a 30-second kind of thing. I should also tell you, if you have not figured it out yet, that we are taping these events. There is both an audio tape and a videotape. The videotape will be available to the public probably within 24 hours or as soon as possible. Sir.
Hello, Judy, and the rest of your group. My name is Freitas. I want to sort of discuss, what are basic human rights? Thomas Jefferson penned these words: "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." Is that true here in Santa Rosa? Do we have a city government of, by, and for the people, where the people's voice is seriously listened to? We need public hearings like this to air out the dirty laundry on marginalized people. We need to talk about the injustice that happened to Andy Lopez, the 13-year-old child who was gunned down by Deputy Jailhouse on October the 22nd of 2013. There was no 9/11 call. There was no crime in progress. Andy was walking by himself and away from the deputies who drove up behind him in their squad car. 10 seconds later, Andy is dead from 7 shots into his body. We need to talk about law enforcement policies that criminalize the poor and voiceless neighborhoods like Moreland, Colonial, and Roseland, while gentrifying the non-Latino neighborhoods like Fountain Grove and Spring Lake. Our humanity depends on all of our humanity. There is no passion to be found in settling for a life that is less than the one we are capable of living. The opposite of poverty is not wealth. The opposite of poverty is justice. The character of our community will be judged by how we treat the abused, the suffering, the poor, the incarcerated, the inequality of people, and the exclusion of people. We need to care about human rights and the basic dignity for all people. Do people deserve to die for their crimes, or do we deserve to kill? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who would like to speak on non-agendized items?
Evening. My name is Magic. I'm a part of the Coalition for Justice for Andy Lopez. And I'm a mother that is very emotional when I try to talk about what's happened. I cannot even imagine what CJ Lopez feels and Rodriguez. We need to have a community oversight committee that is separate from the police forces to look at many issues like retraining our police force, demilitarizing our police force. The entire country is being supplied with every military equipment that they could need. Luckily, cities like Berkeley have rejected these huge tanks that have been offered to them, and we as a city can reject that approach to dealing with our citizens as well. We need to have peacemakers. We need to have a police force and sheriffs that are concerned about the people and do not look at them as gang members or poor people that should continue to be disenfranchised to keep them as the labor force. That's really why there's intimidation in the poor communities. And what is just is unbelievable is that teenagers were told to lie on the ground with guns pointed because they were preparing for a garage sale the next day. There was helicopters above shining lights on them. Their parents came out and they were, with guns pointed at them, told to go back in or someone would be shot. This is just inconceivable to me that we would treat our children like this. How could we do this? What's happened to us as a people? How have we come to this, where guns are drawn on children? Children are killed in 10 seconds. At a place where Sheriff Gilhouse knew that children played with guns, toy guns in that lot. Do that. He's been witness driving by when they did it. We have to do something to become human again, to have our humanity. Please realize how important this is. Please remember our children and our hearts and our humanity, because we're losing it. We really are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
My name is Marty Roth, and I live in the West County. I've lived here for a long time. So I'm going to just read my statement pretty briefly. I just wanted to start by saying that many of us are beyond disappointment, and we're beyond anger and beyond rage. And because this isn't working, I have 2 minutes to speak, and if only Andy Lopez were given 2 minutes, if only Andy were given more than 10 seconds to respond to a voice somewhere calling. Was it calling to him? Who could that be? So as he was turning, like any of us would do, to see where the voice might be coming from, in an instant he was gunned down, shot on the spot, no chance to look, to see, to speak, to say, I'm just a boy. Incomprehensible how a deputy, a well-trained marksman at that, could shoot a child he probably saw many times in that same lot on Moreland, playing in the field like children do with their air rifles. I'm a parent, and I will tell you without a doubt that I can spot a child a half a block away by the way they walk, the way they carry themselves. Children actually have a way of carrying themselves, you know. Hey, you can give me a test. After all, I am an expert. I have over 30 years experience as a parent, watching and being around children. Now Deputy Gilhouse was the expert to post a child for law enforcement for who and what and when and where to kill. He was a man who knew guns, lived guns, adored guns, wrote about guns, breathed guns, probably slept with guns. On every level, he was the go-to man. Yet he could not recognize a child, he could not recognize a toy gun, he could not wait for backup. We begged the other officer, who has obviously remained incognito, to come forward to speak the truth, and he did not shoot. Why didn't the man who was not the expert refrain from shooting Andy? But the expert did shoot Andy. Something about policy is so very wrong. Something about police being allowed to shoot someone in a split second and call it self-defense is abhorrent. Unfortunately, Andy Lopez is just the latest in a long list of killing of our citizens by police and deputies in Sonoma County. How many of them were the experts, like Eric Gilhouse? I guess it does not matter anyway. Be you the trainer or the trainee. It's simply okay to kill whenever you think you might be in harm's way. This policy, the use of deadly force, must change. This was and is the same policy in place from the last advisory committee for the Civil Rights Commission back in before 2000, when seemingly unjustified killings by the police were increasing. It's worse now, and the powers that be in this county have done absolutely nothing to address the unbridled behavior of an out-of-control law enforcement. We, the citizens, are the target practice for ill-trained, unchecked, increased militarization of the police. Our elected officials use policy themselves to allow them to lie to the people so they can't or won't help us in the time of crisis.
It's been 3 minutes. I'm sorry to stop you, but I have to be fair
Okay.
of all speakers.
I guess you get my point.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on non-agendized items? Sir.
name's Montana Pogba. I had the pleasure and honor of being a law clerk at the Supreme Court of the United States for 3 years with retired Justice William O. Douglas, and studying constitutional law under Justice Anthony Kennedy when he was on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, teaching at Victoria School of Law in Sacramento. I taught constitutional law and contract law here at Empire School of Law for 10 years. I quit because they shredded the Constitution to such an extent, somehow using the Patriot Act, that I could no longer in good faith teach something that was only being honored in the breach. A year later, I spent 3 days in the Brick Hotel. The first day, on trumped-up charges, I might add, that were all dismissed, thanks to the good work of Andy Martinez and Paul Lasada. The first day I was there, arrested for no good reason. I heard shouting, screaming. I didn't know what it was. And then they got to me, handcuffed behind my back, so I didn't have it all put into my back of my hand. I answered every question they wanted under bright lights, singing like a bird. And then they tased me when I went down, telling them, I've answered all your questions a million times. I can't give it anymore. I'm going to meditate. And so I went down into a lotus position, pulled down my breeches, and applied 50,000 volts to my coccyx directly for no good reason. I yelled and screamed like everybody else. They put me back into the holding cell, left me laying there. I don't know how long it was till somebody came and prodded me with their boot. Come on, Todd, we know you're still alive. Well, there was other people that didn't make it through that. Thank you. And I hope that this commission realizes that it can happen to anyone. Anyone. The fellow who was lieutenant commander of the Steelhouse SWAT team apparently couldn't take the pressure after I went to the Board of Supervisors and told them what had happened in open court session. He was found with a hole in his head. Apparently a suicide. Lieutenant David Cronin, the brother of the high school football coach Cardinal Newman. Rest in peace. It didn't have to happen. Learn the Constitution. Police officers, teachers, everyone. We are all the same. We all want to be treated fairly, with equal justice under law. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on non-agendized items? Okay. Before we proceed on our agenda, there is one announcement I did not make earlier, and that is for the remainder of our meeting, since the beginning of our meeting, we do have available headset and simultaneous translation services for any of you who may desire it. Can somebody make that announcement in Spanish for me?
Sí. Deja, estoy yo y es un poco más fácil. Si hay alguien que quiere una traducción a español, tenemos equipos de transmisores y receptores para que puedan oír en español o inglés como prefieran.
Thank you. Are there any announcements from commissioners? All right. I would announce that we currently have 3 openings on the commission, one in the 1st district, one in the 2nd district, one in the 3rd district. If there is anybody who is interested in those openings or knows somebody who is interested, please contact your supervisor's office. They will walk you through the application process. Do I have from commissioners any supervisor communication updates? All right. So I want to move on to new business. Sheriff Steve Freitas contacted the commission and noted that he was seeking public input in the creation of his office's policy regarding the Trust Act. That is why we are here tonight. So in a moment, I'm going to turn it over to the sheriff, who will, I assume, make some sort of presentation up front. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. And then we're going to open it to a dialogue from those of you who are here, because we truly want, the sheriff's office wants, and we are here to facilitate your input on this topic. So with that, let me turn it over to the sheriff. Sheriff Freitas?
Good evening, and I'd like to thank the commission for facilitating this meeting for us and for giving the sheriff's office and myself this forum to seek input on the Trust Act. So a very brief history, if I can. Historically, it had been the case for most sheriffs that immigration detainers, when placed by the Department of Homeland Security, commonly referred to as ICE, that those detainers were mandatory. When you received a detainer, you were required to hold that individual for 48 hours. That was the belief in at least 90%, if not more, of the counties in California, and that was my personal belief. That federal law, which said you shall maintain custody, required me to maintain custody of any individuals in my jail who had a federal detainer placed on them. California, the legislature in Sacramento did not like that, and so they passed a law last year, and it was signed by the governor in October, which is commonly known as the Trust Act. And what the Trust Act ultimately does is it basically gives sheriffs three choices on what to do when you receive a detainer from the federal government. First choice is you can honor no detainers. Sheriffs now have complete discretion to honor no detainers from ICE. The second choice is the Trust Act elucidates numerous sections of different laws, the penal code, other sections, that you can hold people on detainers for if they are currently charged with that or if they have previous convictions with those. And there's a long list of those, and I believe we've included those in a handout here tonight, and they were included also in the press release about this meeting so people can see those. And so sheriffs can use all of those sections. Anyone who has a detainer that has those, that meets those requirements, you can just hold all of those people. What I felt here in Sonoma County was that either one of those choices, quite frankly, is too easy. The hard work is looking through there and going through and seeing what works best for our county. If they're going to give us discretion, let's decide as a county which detainers we want to honor. And that's the philosophical decision that we made at the sheriff's office. Once I did that, then I started meeting with groups of people who, through my first 3 years as sheriff, had reached out to me and had expressed interest in anything related to immigration, whether they be immigration advocates or immigration people from the community. And so I reached out to those groups that I knew, including North Bay Organizing Project. Mr. Koshner, I always forget the acronym for your group, if you could help me.
Well, we're now Comité Vida, but we were the Committee for Immigrant Rights of Sonoma County.
Yes, thank you. And groups similar to that. And I met with groups and got their input. And when I talked to those folks, I said I wanted to also hold a public meeting. That's why we're here tonight. So ultimately what the Trust Act does, as I said, it gives discretion to do that. And there's three different parts to it. When a person comes into custody on new charges, they don't have any previous convictions, the only way that a detainer can be honored is if they are arrested for serious or violent felonies, and those are called out in the policy which we provided here tonight, and that is after what's called a probable cause determination has been made. If that's not done, folks are free to get out of jail by bail or other means, as they could not have done before if they had an immigration detainer. The second part is if someone has ever been convicted of a serious or violent felony or certain state prison eligible felonies at any time, then the detainer can be honored. The third category is a different set of violations if you've been convicted within the past 5 years. It is a very long list. So what we've done is we've gone through, and what I've tried to do is strike a balance between public safety, between not having people stay in jail that really don't need to be in jail. I believe in a risk-based jail. If you are following state realignment, I believe that jail should be risk-based. So what we immediately did at the sheriff's office on our own and after meeting with some groups is we tried to take out all the nonviolent crimes. Any misdemeanors and any nonviolent crimes. Some of the state prison eligible felonies though, like residential burglary and things, although they might not be actual physical violence, it's a very violent act on the people. To get your home burglarized is a traumatic event. And so some of those are still eligible. The possession of drugs, many of those are felonies. We eliminated that. The only drug things that will maintain on detainers is people who sell drugs, manufacture drugs, or traffic drugs. Simple possession, out. If those people have a way to get out of jail, they can get out. We will not honor the detainer. That's where we're at right now. I provided copies of the interim policy. I truly do want your input on what you think, what we should do in Sonoma County, based on the options that we have. Of course, whatever we have to do needs to be legal. I'll just give you some very brief numbers on what our policy has shown so far in January. So this is from January 1st until today. ICE has issued 38 detainers in that time in Sonoma County. We've rejected 28 of them outright. 28 of 38. So 75% of the detainers we've just said we're not going to honor. This time in 2014, when compared to the same time period in 2013, there's a 64% reduction in people that we have turned over to ICE in the Sonoma County jail. So that's what the new law and the new policy has resulted in. And I'm curious to hear what the public has to say about those numbers and about where we're headed with this policy. With me tonight is Assistant Sheriff Lorenzo Duenas and Assistant Sheriff Randall Walker. And if we get into questions that are too technical for me, they're here to help me out. And I know, Judy, I don't know how the commission works, but I'm interested in your comments, of course, and if possible, I would try and do my best to answer questions too, if that's okay with the commission.
We can do that. Before I open it up to the public, I'm going to open it up to commissioners. Comments and or questions. Gail.
Sheriff Freitas? Hi. I'd like to ask a question about what you just said, that ICE detainers can be honored for any conviction or prior conviction. And this is on page 5 of 8 of your interim policy, and it's under section C. And in here it says ICE detainers will be honored, and so can be, to me, it speaks with discretion, will be sounds more mandatory. And so my question is, I'm looking up at this list of all these felonies. One here, number 20, right above that, is threats to victims or witnesses which would constitute a felony. So if a person 20 years ago, when they were 20 years old, had threatened somebody and they had a felony conviction, but they straightened out their life, they had children, they were involved in their community, would that existing felony from 20 years ago mandate that they be deported, or does that, you have discretion to decide that that is not, that they're not, they don't have to be deported?
Okay. Well, first, as I said in the beginning, now the Trust Act gives me discretion to not take any detainers.
Okay, well, it said will be here, and that's why it sounded mandatory.
No, I understand, but then this is a temporary policy.
Okay.
So what this is referring to is will be honored for a conviction of a prior conviction punishable by actually imprisonment in the state prison. So that means you've not only been convicted, you've been sent to state prison, which leads to a level, I believe, of seriousness. 20 years, I assume they're still on the record, and I don't know if in this section, I'm trying to track it down, if there's one set of crimes that it has to be within the past 5 years.
Okay,
There's another set that are forever. So we'd have to check that. If it was in the 5 years, I would probably lean on using that discretion to hold that person in this case. If it's 20 years ago, that's what we're here to talk about, is to see, what's kind of the line for us and kind of what the thought is on those situations.
My sense of that is that the person become a good member of the community. This is a useful mistake, that there ought to be some discretion there, and that they ought, for instance, if they have children and they're established in the community, they ought not to be deported because they have that. And, B and C didn't sound like, that they had to end up in a state prison. It sounded like B was separate from C, and when you talk now, it sounded a little bit like it had to be so serious that they ended up in a state prison. So those sound like they're tied together.
Yeah, well, B is the serious and violent felonies called out in the penal code. And then C talks about for a felony where you actually were sentenced to state prison. And then now with realignment, as we know, many felons don't go to state prison anymore, they stay here in our jail. So in theory, only the most serious offenders ever go to state prison.
Okay. On
I'm
balance,
open, I would absolutely accept your input. If you specifically think for that section, we should not honor it, that's what I'm here to get is people's ideas, so I'm happy to take that.
thank you for being here and taking our input.
Chris, and then Demetra.
Well, thank you, Sheriff, for coming and making this presentation. I have been an immigration lawyer, some of you know, for 25 years, and defended families and individuals in deportation court, and 20 years in the city of San Francisco, and then 5 years here. So I wanted to offer my insights on this policy. We represent right now about 500 families and individuals from the Bay Area who are in deportation proceedings, and probably 200 or more from this county. And I can say that about 80% of those, if not more, were put in deportation proceedings due to holds under the Secure Communities Act. And that applies to this county as well. So if you look back to the 5 years or more in Sonoma County, I would say that the overwhelming majority of the cases we have in deportation court are from holds. And I would say that about 80%, in my opinion, or more, of those people that are currently in proceedings would not be in proceedings under this policy. So in short, what I'm saying is that 80% of our clients, if not more, would not have deportation proceedings had this policy been in effect earlier. And I think that's huge. I think the impact of this is going to be very, very significant for this county and across the state. We can discuss some of the detail here. For example, the point raised by Gail about how far back we should go and look at past convictions, and I think that's a legitimate question. But let's not lose sight of the forest for the trees. I mean, this is going to make a huge reduction in the number of people in our county put into deportation proceedings. And I think the sheriff and the sheriff's department are taking a big step here, a step we've asked them to take for a number of years, and you ought to be applauded and thanked for this big step. And I think the policy itself reflects much of what the legislature recommended and is very consistent with it, and I think it's most importantly going to have an enormous impact on this community. I have some concerns about whether a lot of these people still might be put in deportation proceedings because ICE officers can still go to their house or their place of work and arrest them. That's obviously not something within your ambit and your control. But I do have a question, which is partly due to my ignorance of the wealth of the database, if you will, of information available to them. Do you know if ICE has personal information on persons arrested or charged? I know that they have access to the FBI report that indicates when somebody is arrested or charged or convicted. Do you know if they also have access to personal data about whether they were born outside the country or their personal address? Is it something you're aware of, Sheriff?
I don't know that. And the way that they get notified, the FBI, ICE is notified through the FBI, is simply by fingerprints. How much information goes along with that, I don't know. It's purely electronic. I don't know on a personal level what information ICE has on folks. I don't know that. I know we don't have it.
So up till now, their awareness that there was somebody in your North County facility or your facility here that was arrested or charged was based on information that was required by you to make available to them, and then how would they have known that that person was not born in this country?
I don't know. I believe that the way I understand it's supposed to work, and Randall, help me if I get off course here, is when the fingerprints go in, the FBI, ICE are looking for certain things, whether it's prior deportations or what their flag is to place a hold on somebody. And I know that sometimes they come to the jail and they do interviews to try and verify the information that they have.
Right. How it worked previously is when they would get fingerprinted in secure communities, it's run through Homeland Security. And Homeland Security, if they have been in the system once before already for some sort of crime, then they would flag it as someone who is potentially here illegally. So then they would place a hold. ICE would then come in to our facilities and do the interviews.
Okay.
Right, and through their own investigation would determine whether the hold should stay or not. And we would also provide
Yeah,
them
let me
with...
interrupt for a minute. Can those of back here?
No.
No, we've got to get you on a mic.
Because you're in.
And we would also provide them with a roster of who was booked. Now, we no longer do that.
Okay.
Okay, so we don't have any communications with ICE. We don't call ICE if we suspect that somebody's here illegally. So it's strictly through secure communities right now.
And I assume that they no longer are able to come in and interview people in the jail.
Well, if someone meets the hold criteria,
Right.
then they can do the interview, which is better for that individual if they come in and do some sort of investigation before actually placing the hold.
But if they don't meet the hold criteria, they're not given access to those people?
No.
Okay, that's a huge step.
Yeah. What I would say is, I think I mentioned 38 holds were placed, we rejected 28 of them. On those 28 rejections, they never even know. They wouldn't come to interview them, is my assumption.
Right.
Now, of course, if another agency, whether it be a state agency or a federal agency, wants to come to our jail to do an investigation, the law requires that I cooperate. But we're just not going to tell them that they're here. So we'll see how good they are, I guess.
I can speak from personal knowledge that we've had 3 or 4 families that contacted us and said, hey, there's an ICE hold on our family member, we're going to need your help. And then when the person finished their criminal court case, they were released and ICE never got them, and that's in Sonoma County, whereas previously that person would have been put in deportation proceedings. So I've already seen an impact in my office. I don't know about Rick or others, but
I know it's a very serious subject, but to make light of it, it almost seems like I'm going to put you out of business.
well, fortunately, there's a lot of other work for us to do for instance.
I think Chris would welcome that.
Right.
Demetria?
I wanted to know if there were any individuals that might have been placed under a hold when January 1st rolled around, and at that point, was there any kind of procedural shift towards those individuals?
I think, but I'm going to have Randall correct me if I'm wrong, I think we looked at those folks and we released any holds that were in effect on January 1st. I know the other number here that I didn't share is I believe in November, we had 100 people in custody on ICE holds, and after January 1st, that went down to 50 like that. So I think we did exactly what you're asking if we did, yes.
Thank you.
So just a clarification, there's a situation mentioned on page 5 that talks about wobblers, must be a technical term. Someone who could have had a misdemeanor, who had a misdemeanor conviction, but he could have been charged with a felony, he or she could have been charged with a felony. Those you might honor the detainees for. It looks to me like another level of discretion. How do you decide that? Yeah, so to clarify, there is entire discretion. It's not even levels of discretion. The goal of this policy is to make it consistent so that everybody gets treated equally. That's the goal of this policy. That is one section that I am still conflicted on, and as I get input, I would say that section is not set in stone. What that means by a wobbler is that there are some crimes that are both misdemeanors and felonies, and it is up to the court to determine that. If you go to prison for a wobbler, which I will say is a very rare occurrence to begin with, then this could apply. I don't know if we're going to apply those, and it would not be my intention to apply those if they're nonviolent. Yeah, there's another word that comes up right at the end, which is warrants. Is it ICE that issues detainers as well as warrants? How do warrants differ from detainers? A warrant is actually issued by a magistrate, by a court, and a detainer can be placed by an ICE agent, I believe. Chris could probably correct me on that. When we're referring to warrants in this context, it is warrants issued in general by a superior court of either our county, another county, or other states. And sometimes federal warrants, but that, quite frankly, is rare.
Other comments from commissioners? All right, at this point I'm going to open it up to a dialogue, and I specifically use that word, with those people who are here tonight. Your comments are welcome, your questions are welcome. We will accommodate both. Could I please ask for a show of hands, and can you repeat in Spanish just the next couple of sentences? Could I ask for a show of hands of those who wish to speak tonight?
Los que quieran hablar esta noche sobre este tema, quieren levantar la mano, por favor.
Okay, not too many, so I'm going to allow 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I'm actually going to, what do we got? I'm going to allow 3 minutes for each person. We're going to have to shift mics back and forth because evidently some of them are not working. So I'm just going to ask you to come up one by one, and if there is someone, repeat this please, if there is someone who wishes to speak in Spanish, we'll get it in Spanish and get it back and forth.
Por favor, los que quieran hacer comentarios, háganlo uno a uno. Si hay alguien que quiera hablar en español, habrá siempre alguien que le pueda traducir.
All right. Who'd like to be first?
¿Quién quiere empezar?
Thank you. Anywhere? Fine.
At the table, please. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to hear.
Thank you. Good evening, Sheriff, Assistant Sheriffs Walker, Duenas, and Commissioners. Thank you very much for this taking of public input. Like Chris Karofsky, I'm really impressed with the openness of the county and really very happy that that these developments are taking place. The question Mr. Baum asked about warrants and detainers, very happy to realize that there's a recognition of the difference. And although there are detainers from other states, let's say a Texas parole violation, and Texas sends over a detainer through the interstate agreement on detainers, those come with probable cause findings. Some magistrate has said there's probable cause to hold this person. But when an ICE agent comes to a jail and puts a hold on someone, that ICE agent has not yet done any investigation to determine whether the person is even a U.S. citizen. And they place that hold based on surname, based on some indication that they were born in another country. But 1/3 of all Californians who were born in another country are U.S. citizens by naturalization now. And so when you add in the legal permanent residents and the people with temporary status and so on, it's not probable that simply based on foreign birth that someone is actually an alien and subject to deportation. So, very happy with those results. I do want to say, though, that since a detainer is not a warrant, it's our county that's taking the responsibility to hold someone. The piece of paper that I-247 no longer takes responsibility for the hold. We are doing the holding when we decide to hold someone. And so we take the liability. So if we hold a U.S. citizen, we're going to be liable for it. And so I would urge for us to add, I don't believe it's in your packet here tonight, but Wendy did send this to me, the eligibility determination sheet. And I would recommend that we add, that the county add to this, that ICE has given you either an affidavit or some sort of statement that the person they want you to hold is not a U.S. citizen. They've investigated the question and they found the person is not a U.S. citizen and that the person is prima facie deportable. Otherwise, our county is liable for holding people who are not deportable on whom no probable cause finding has been made. Those are my main points. There have been some indications early on that maybe the jail is holding people with felony charges who don't yet have felony convictions. And I hope that's not the case, and if it is, that will be corrected. But in general, I'm very supportive of the direction the county is taking. I would urge the county to look at the Alameda County policy, and I'll pass it to the staff because it simplifies things, decreases risk of liability, and I think goes in the direction that Sheriff Freitas has already pointed.
Sheriff Freitas, did you have any comments?
Well, the only comment would be, I think at the end there, Richard, you mentioned that people who are arrested for felonies but maybe not convicted, I believe part of the Trust Act says people who are arrested but not convicted for serious and violent felonies can be held on detainers without a prior conviction. Is that correct?
My understanding, Sheriff, is that only if there's been a probable cause finding under 872. So if they've just been arrested and they haven't yet gone before the magistrate, haven't had the preliminary hearing or any probable cause finding, know that they cannot be held. They are eligible to post bond and be released.
But an 872 probable cause determination is not a conviction. You mentioned not
Yeah.
convictions.
Right, right.
Okay.
And I think we can simplify matters by cutting back to just convictions, as Alameda does. But anyway.
Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Steve Fabian. I want to thank you for having this meeting. I want to thank Sheriff Freitas for the urgency that's going into this policy. I really am very appreciative. I've been a criminal defense attorney for 35 years, working in the public defender office as well as privately. And I just want to point out a couple things that I feel should be looked at. First, I want to commend you for taking out all the drug possession cases. In the 35 years I've worked, I've watched so many families just being torn apart for minor crimes and had to watch the pain of their loved ones being deported, and sometimes the father or the mother or his son being sent to away from the rest of their family. On the felonies with the 872 finding, often what happens is, for strategic reasons or other reasons, an attorney may waive a preliminary hearing. And what will happen is there's really been no finding of probable cause, but the judge, upon the waiver, will sign the 872 declaration. And I think that there has to be a look in situations where, on these felonies and the 872, whether we should see if there's a conviction or not, or there's not a conviction. And because sometimes a lot of 872 proceedings happen where there's been no evidence and no one's looked at anything. It's just a way of skipping a step in the criminal justice system. And so my question is, and I do have one, if a person is charged with a serious or violent felony or a felony that would find them where you would hold them with 872, what happens if they're found not guilty? Does the hold get dropped? I mean, do you stop honoring the hold that or it gets reduced down to a misdemeanor at a later stage, either by agreement with the district attorney and the judge, or the judge at some point later at time of sentencing reduces the crime to a misdemeanor? At that point in time, would you still honor the hold? I think that needs to be looked at too, because I think you just looking at the probable cause determination is kind of premature, and there has to be a way to see what happens with this case. What if there's a trial and the person's found not guilty of a serious or violent felony, or any felony?
Can I answer that as you go?
Well, I'll take it up my time.
You got a question, I might lose track of it, I apologize.
Yeah.
To answer your question, I think you're talking about at the end of proceedings when they're found not guilty. What I would say is even at the probable cause hearing, if a judge determines that there's not probable cause to say that they're in custody for a serious or violent felony, or reduces it to something else at that time, we would release the hold immediately.
And would it happen to say at the end of trial or accept to see if that happens?
Yes, absolutely. And the other question that you talked about, and I'm not trying to take away from time, I apologize, we said dialogue, so, am I on time?
You're fine.
Okay. The 872 thing that you mentioned, where me and Randall, we talked about this in some of our meetings. We might have talked about it with you, Richard, about the idea that some people stipulate to the probable cause hearing, and that same concern that you have, we're talking to county council about that too, because that's a concern that we have also. So we're aware of that, and that makes sense to me what you're saying.
I would also advocate that all misdemeanors do not honor holds on that. These are often determinations either by the district attorney's office or by a judge that you're just not serious. And two of them that really come to mind are second-degree burglaries, which are wobblers, which sometimes are really just shoplifting cases, including some grand thefts, especially older grand thefts where it was under 400 hours or more.
I think we specifically excluded 487.
Oh, 487, excuse me then. And
that's an exclusion, it's a non-violent felony.
And those are the main things I want to talk about because I'm out of time, I know that. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please. We'll get you next, sir.
Oops. Good evening. I'm Marty McReynolds, Chair of the Sonoma County Chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union. I'm not a lawyer, and I cannot speak to the complexities of the law of this. I just want to commend the sheriff for taking this step and for coming here to discuss it with the public. I think it's commendable that you've eliminated the simple drug possession, which might get a lot of people deported who are basically good citizens or good people to have in our community. I would recommend that you look at this Alameda County policy, which Mr. Kochner has distributed. I think by simplifying the list of crimes, it will make things easier on the county staff, on the sheriff's staff, and also much simpler for the community, and will reinforce what I think is the thrust, the intention of the Trust Act, which is to build trust in the community, that law enforcement is working to protect and serve them, and is not there as an arm of the federal government looking to deport them. Thanks very much.
Thank you, sir. Gentleman in the back.
Good evening. My name is Matt Myers. I live in Windsor. My question is, for clarification, is how are children or minors going to be treated if they are convicted of a more serious issue? Obviously, they're children. In my experience with children, they don't necessarily make good decisions. So how would they be handled?
You know, Matt, it's nice to see you again.
Yes.
I'm at a loss for your question because we don't keep any minors in my jail. I think I never try and deflect a question, but I think your question would be more appropriate for Bob Oakes, who's the chief probation officer.
Any more information you can give me how it's
We haven't even talked about minors because we don't deal with them in our jail. So I guess what I would say is, anybody tried to show up at our jail with a minor, we would say.
Well, I understand, but I would think that your position, with all due respect, you'd be aware of how that's handled. Right now, there are issues of, families being split up for different reasons, and that's.
Are you talking about the children of people who were detaining, or people, juveniles?
Well, I'm talking about, mainly right now, I'm talking about, for example, teenagers that might be more involved in gangs or more serious crimes.
Yeah, I don't know what Bob Oakes has decided to do with that, and I'm sorry that I don't know. And I appreciate your comment that I should know, but this is also new, and we're trying to wrap up work we're doing at the sheriff's office. I haven't had time to have a lot of conversations with Bob Oakes about what he's going to be doing with the juveniles.
All right, something to follow up with.
Thank you. I will follow up. If you want to reach back out to me, I'll be happy to talk to Bob Oakes about it. Okay.
So my name is Lucy Becerra, and I'm with the community. I moved here like almost 15 years ago, and since I moved here, I have always never feel like I can have the enforcement in my side. I have always felt that they were out to get me. I don't know if other members of my community have felt that way, but that's my personal feeling. I moved here without documents, and that means I was driving without a driver's license. And I have always prayed not to get in a car accident and not to get stopped by a police enforcement, by a law enforcement. For two reasons. One, because I'm fear of deportation, and being a single mother, it was very difficult because I didn't know what was going to really happen to my daughter and how we as a family will handle that. Right? And then, of course, because of the car impound, if I didn't get deported, I still had to deal with over $2,000, which I didn't have. As a single mother raising my daughter. The car impound hopefully gets solved in the next year, since there is another County hopefully, which will allow people like me without documents to have a driver's license. But the deportation here, I hope this helps many people like me who have been in this situation to don't fear law enforcement as much, right? I'm thankful that this step is being taken. I would like to see the only people who are convicted of a felony being called for immigration. And I would like to see what you think about that. Like, are you hoping to get to that point where only people who are convicted be held?
I think right now we're pretty well on the path of only people who've been convicted of violent felonies, not just any felony, is kind of where we're headed. As far as the local charges, and what we are talking about is it's going to be a probable cause hearing, and that's some of the things we're talking about. So I'm taking input, and I haven't entirely made my mind up yet. I appreciate your comments. And also, if you're still worried about the impounds, I would just point out to you that there's been a significant change in the impound policies throughout, not just the sheriff's office. We were the first ones to do it, but throughout Sonoma County, there's been a significant change in policies. So, at least to some extent, you have a little less to fear that way too.
Only for one time.
Well, one time's better than no time.
Next speaker.
Again, my name is Magic, and we do need to trust each other again. I want to bring in the big picture, though. The reason that people are coming to this country is because of the policies like NAFTA that have opened up our borders to make corporations be able to cross them no problem at all, and labor from people that are impoverished by what NAFTA has done cannot. So one of the questions I want to ask is, will you direct your staff and yourself to stop using the term illegal alien, which in 20 years will sound like an absolutely absurd and offensive term, to be used about human beings that are trying to have a living here. It's a public record that you were planning to defy the Trust Act.
That's actually not accurate. People said that I said that. I never did say that.
I find that hard to believe, sir.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And I would like to give you the benefit of the doubt. This isn't because it's an election year. So I would like to know in your heart, has something changed? Because all of us are going to have to change the way we feel about each other as human beings. What process went on that you care now when you were ready to, you have spoken many times in support of ICE. We know that. Please don't pretend you haven't. That's very hard to deal with. I also would ask you to direct your staff to stop stopping people because they're driving while brown. This racial profiling is not okay. I also prefer the word sanctuary, but that got killed when David Rabbit ran for office and did a hit piece, his supporters did a hit piece 3 weeks before Pam Turlop was winning in the election, showing Latino people could come to a picnic, showing a picnic of white people that could get killed if you let Latinos have sanctuary. That was appalling. I don't want to see that ever happen here again. So I would like you to answer the questions about how did your heart change? Will you stop using the word illegal alien? And please respect the driving while brown.
I don't think people have heard me use the term illegal alien. If that is in our policy, I will look at that and see if that's maybe language that just as we're copying federal law or things. But I don't believe we use that term, and I don't think I've used that term. If you can find some public record where I have, I encourage you to point that out to me, and I'll apologize to you.
Could you direct your staff not to use that?
Yeah, I don't think we do, but if we
could
do,
you direct your staff not to?
Yeah, I don't think that's the appropriate term, but yes, so.
Yes, you will.
Yes, I don't think that's the appropriate term. So, to the question about when my heart changed, my heart didn't change. If you look at, there's another document we have here tonight about the changes we made long before an election year, as some of the people in the room who have known me for a time can maybe they'll come up and talk about this. Many of these changes that were made, the towing thing, the matricular cars, us not doing certain operations with ICE in the field, those happened immediately upon me becoming sheriff in 2011. Secondly, I never spoke publicly in favor of ICE. What I said was, I absolutely would honor federal law, whether I agree with it or not. My personal opinion doesn't matter. It was my opinion, and it was my county council's opinion, that federal law required me to cooperate with ICE. That is all that I ever said. Now that California has passed a law, as a California constitutional officer, I feel bound to follow that law. I never said I would defy the Trust Act. What I said was, there will be a conflict very soon with federal and state law, and I would have to see which one to follow. If a judge told me that I would have to, and right now, if a federal judge says California's law is illegal, we're back to square one. That's all I've ever said.
All our ancestors would be classified as illegal aliens, except the native people of this country. So we really need to show that stuff.
Next speaker.
Hi. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the meeting, but I'm just a regular citizen, and I grew up in Connecticut, and then there was not that many Latinos around, and I never experienced racism. But when I came here, it's very real, and I've heard some awful stories. And as a bilingual person, I'm ashamed of myself that it took Andy Lopez's death to really get me out. And I want to thank you for this and for the input. And I also want to encourage you to please retrain your officers and have them tap into their critical thinking gene and not their mean gene. And I don't want to cause problems. I just feel like I really need to say this. And here's Sonoma County. It boggles my mind that there's miles and miles and miles of vineyards, and they don't pick themselves. Hardworking people pick them. And it's hard work. It's amazing. I've seen people's hands chopped up, and they do it really fast. It's really heavy. It's hard work. These are hardworking people. And I would like your officers to respect them. The stories I've heard are incredible. The officers harass the people. They taunt them. They violate their human rights. So I think with this great new policy, there has to be a practice and some retraining and some cultural competency, which is what she was talking about. So I beg you to please retrain your officers, teach them some cultural competency, which means to listen and to respect and to treat people like human beings. Because they're bullies. I'm sorry. Everyone speaks and tells stories of sheriffs being bullied, more than the Santa Rosa police, more than others. So please, just give these people the respect that they deserve. There's a backbone of the wine industry. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hold that down, please. I respect your passion, but let's be fair to every speaker, and let's keep the comments down.
Good evening. My name is Marty Bennett. I live in the city of Sonoma for the last 25 years. I've also teach at Santa Rosa Junior College. I am also co-chair of the North Bay Jobs with Justice organization, and we've been long active in issues regarding labor rights, immigrant rights, and low-wage workers struggling to earn a living wage. I've long been active in public policy and studied public policy, and I know it's one thing to pass a law, it's another thing to effectively implement the law. So what I'd like to do, and this does relate to the last speaker, I'd like to give the sheriff a chance to respond to this question and tell us the ideas and the plans that you have developed specifically for the training that you're going to provide to your officers to conform to the Trust Act and to implement the interim policy that you're developing.
So the interim policy has been issued to everyone, but everyone also, they know it's interim. Once we get a policy firmly set in place, which I believe will be hopefully 60 days after this process is done, then we will train people, the people who are responsible, and this applies primarily to releases. Many people aren't responsible for that. So for the people who need to know who to keep in custody and who not to keep in custody, yes, they will absolutely be trained on the law, the policy. Then they'll have to show that they can do that, and they'll be supervised in their doing of that. And I'm sure that there are many people, whether it's a church group or whoever, that will be watching us to make sure we're doing it. Of course, we can make mistakes, and we'll hopefully learn from those mistakes. But our goal, this policy, as I mentioned earlier, from 100 people on the hold to 50, it's also a huge population help in the jail, and our jail right now is too crowded for the amount of staff that we have. So we're interested in any way that we can do it also. So we have not only a vested interest because it's the law, a vested interest because it helps us here locally in keeping people in jail who should be in jail and not keeping those in jail who shouldn't be.
But are you going to, is the training going to be an internal training within the department? Are you working with other counties in terms of best practices around training officers? I wanted to know a little bit more specifics about how the training, who's going to be doing it, how it's going to be carried out, what kind of accountability there will be that indeed the information that is being departed is and provided that officers have absorbed that and understand it, etc.
Yeah, there'll be layers of supervision to make sure that they've absorbed it and to be accountable to make sure people are not being held when they should be. Likewise, that they're not being released when they shouldn't be. As far as other counties and best practices, yeah, I've heard from several people here tonight about Alameda County and their policy, and maybe it's simpler. I've already written a note to look at that, so I'm definitely interested in other places' best practices and how to do that. The training, yes, it will be internal, and we do it through, we have annual training, something like this that takes effect immediately. It would be in small groups with the people responsible, then broadened out to everybody for when they become maybe eligible to work those assignments.
Thank you very much.
Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Dan Brellman, and I've been living in the city of Sonoma for the last 30 years. And I want to thank the commissioners for making this forum possible tonight. And I want to thank you very much, Sheriff Freitas, for coming out and dialoguing with us. To Commissioner Jonas's point, we'll be honored. I'm so delighted to hear what you just said to the previous speaker, that you're going to look at the Alameda County policy because it's a wonderful policy. When we talk about flexibility and discernment and things like that and discretion, I think discretion has a component of fluidity to it. And I think what you'll find in the Alameda policy, which is kind of masterful in my opinion, is that fluidity exists, that the sheriff has the ability to be more flexible. And I think what that does is it opens up an incredible dialogue in his own community, in his own county of Alameda, because people won't be as petrified coming forth. It'll be more of a two-way street dialogue where people aren't terrified of looking in a rearview mirror and seeing an officer and feeling like their lives are caving in. So I am encouraged to realize that you all have the Alameda County policy in front of you, and I think it's worth looking at. And I'm delighted to hear that you're willing to look at it as well. I feel very positive tonight and much more secure. And I want to thank all of you for making this possible.
Thank you, sir. Are there additional speakers?
My name is Marina Spiegler, and I'm a resident of Sonoma County, Santa Rosa, in the Medina Valley area. I've been a resident for over 30 years. I would like to further explore the answer you gave the previous speaker. Are officers in the field going to receive training in how to appease the community, that's not the word I want, but on how to treat the public when they're in their patrol car and when they're in the community. Are they going to be trained in civility?
Are you referring to the Trust Act, or?
I am referring to because the Trust Act is being implemented, and that will be, as you were saying, in the jail and those people. But a lot of the problems seem to me to happen in confrontation with officers and in attitudes. And I wondered if you were going to also explore training for the people who do field work in the community.
Yeah, there is constant training. And sometimes it's the state that tells us what we have to train for, and then we have some discretion on what we can train. But yes, we are absolutely, we teach and try, although we do make mistakes and we're not perfect. The idea of civility at a minimum, professionalism also, that is absolutely our goal, and we do provide that training. But I would encourage you, if you have an encounter not like that, just to contact us and let us know about that. The best way we can learn is from our mistakes.
Yes, excuse me though, I think that there have been mistakes. You know, people have been trained, as was brought to the floor in the Andy Lopez event, killing, murder.
Yeah, I'm going to stop you there. I want to limit this discussion to the Trust Act.
Okay.
I welcome you to come back at the end of our meeting when public comment will be open to any subject.
That's fine.
But I do want to limit this discussion to the Trust Act.
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. I would repeat for any of you who may have come in late that the current agenda item is a discussion of the Trust Act. Any non-agendized items can be spoken to at our public comment session. We had one at the beginning. We will have another one at the end.
Queremos comentar que el tema de que estamos hablando ahora es lo que se llama el Trust Act, y ese es el tema del cual recibimos comentarios. Hubo una oportunidad al principio que pudieron hablar sobre otros temas, y habrá otro al final de esta reunión. Habrá un periodo de tiempo que quieran para que puedan comentar otra vez sobre otros temas.
Sounds a lot longer. Do we have any other speakers relative to the Trust Act? Sir.
My name is Asher Shepard. I'm a resident in Santa Rosa. My question goes to the question of how implementation would actually work. It's a little murky to me, and perhaps you can give me an idea of how you think it will work out, because I realize you haven't taken all the steps necessary to answer the question fully. And the situation I'm looking toward is that there's been a determination that a particular person arrested and detained in our county jail should have their presence made known to ICE, but it's a mistake, and their family says it's a mistake. Will they have an opportunity to fit into the process before the actual step is taken in informing ICE? Because that seems to me a go and no way back step. So is there going to be an opportunity for questioning a determination that the person should be detained?
I might not be understanding your question, so if I don't answer it the way that you want, please redirect me. The way that we notify ICE is by fingerprints. The only way that we would know ICE is interested is they send us back a piece of paper that's a detainer, right? When we get that detainer, we look at that person and their charges and their history, and we either honor it or we don't honor it. It's not that we look at people and then we call ICE. That's not how it happens. If what you're saying is, after ICE issues a detainer, and we look at all their charges and say the person says, well, that's not me, that didn't happen, is there a process in place for that to take place? I don't know that yet. Based on the numbers, the reductions we've seen already, I would hope that that's not happening, but that is a good point. What I hear you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put words in your mouth, is there some type of appeal if we tell somebody we're going to honor this ICE detainer, and what you're saying is the information that you have is inaccurate, is there some way for somebody to appeal that?
Precisely.
Okay, that's a
You
good
got it.
point.
Thank you.
That's a good point. I don't have an answer for you right now, but I will take that into consideration in that That does make sense to me.
Thank you.
Are there additional speakers? I think the lady behind you, right there, up. Then we'll get David.
My name is Joanne Forno, and I want to thank you all and thank you, Sheriff, for inviting us here today to provide input. I just wanted to say that I support your earlier statement about just honoring those detainers that were convicted prisoners rather than those that were discharged. I think that's what I heard you say, and I am supportive of that, and also I think this goes a long way to creating trust between law enforcement and the community. I think that's really important, and leaving and not being an arm of ICE. So I think that's very important. I really thank you for that. I just want to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stahl.
My name is David Somm. I'm a resident of Santa Rosa. And Madam Chair, I would really like to compliment you on the direction that the Commission on Human Rights has taken over these past few years. This commission, above and beyond any other board or agency, has really spoken out on behalf of the immigrant community and ensured that the voice and the concerns of that community can be heard. It was not my intention to come to the microphone this evening, but I feel compelled to do so because of some of the comments that were made towards the sheriff, who I've met several times during the course of his administration. And I'm a child immigrant, so my sympathies are with the immigrant community. That being said, I believe that this sheriff has brought this county forward in enormous ways. And I really want to applaud Sheriff Freitas, what you have accomplished. You have moved the needle. You and I see the world through a different prism, but I believe that what you have achieved for this county is more than just about what anyone else could have done. And we who support the immigrant community, particularly those who are undocumented, need to recognize that our best chance of a healthy collaboration is working with you when passions remain high. But I'm confident that forums such as this will really build the bridge, and you have articulated a position which in my mind, goes a long way towards building that trust. Thank you.
Are there additional speakers? Going? Going? Gone. All right, I'm going to ask if the sheriff or either of the two assistant sheriffs have any additional comments.
I would just like to thank people. I don't know if everybody came to this topic because I know you have more things on your agenda, so I'm sure that there's people here to talk about other things. But for the input,
probably not.
What further comments on the Trust Act? I sincerely appreciate that. I'll tell you, one gentleman that mentioned the appeal. I didn't think of that. That's a good point. I don't know what we'll be able to do with that, but that's exactly what I'm here for. I appreciate all your comments, but we're here for some ideas, and that's a good idea. The Alameda County policy, I had heard about that, but I've heard several people here mention it, and I was checking it off as it went, so I'm very interested to see what Alameda County has. I'm not above stealing somebody's good idea, that's for sure. So I appreciate you guys having us. I really do appreciate it. I appreciate the input on this, and I ask people, if you felt like you just didn't want to speak in front of a group of people tonight, those of you who know me, as David mentioned, if you call me or email me, you actually get to me. I return all my own phone calls. I return my own emails. If you got something you want to say to me, I will leave a stack of business cards. Reach out to me and I'll hear what you have to say in person or over the telephone if you'd like.
Are there going to be additional forums to solicit input?
Probably not about the Trust Act. It sounds like, based on what most people said and what I've heard from that where we're going people are comfortable with. Unless some real red flags come up, it would be my intention to move forward with a policy within the next 60 days or so.
On behalf of the commission, Ramon?
Yes, I'm sorry. I believe that we have a couple of comments. We didn't know what was the right time. I just have one question. In regards of the following up about the question with minors in the Trust Act, are you going to follow up, or are we going to follow up? And if we're going to, I would like to volunteer myself to go and talk to the Chief Probation Officer and ask that question so we can have the answer for you next month. And,
I will be happy to follow up in the context of mentioning to Chief Oakes that the question has been raised. But if this group is interested in that, there's nothing that prohibits you guys from reaching out to him directly also.
Yeah.
Just want to, there was some question of your motives, Sheriff Freitas, and I and David have met with you several times. And I want to say your change of heart, I think, you're came because you were freed up legally to be able to do what you wanted to do. And I know that we asked you to go talk to the head of ICE with our message, let's change the federal law, and you did that. You went to Representative Thompson and asked. You went to Senator Boxer and asked. So my experience is that this is all behind the scenes, basically, but he was making an effort to get the law shaped so that he felt that he could do what is now being done with the Trust Act. And I know that it was County Counsel, his lawyer, who's the lawyer for all of the officials in Sonoma County, that was telling him that he couldn't do that. And he chose to listen to his lawyer. Now, some of you might think that's not a good idea, but some of you think it's a good idea. So I just want to thank you for your needs. Always, we haven't agreed on everything, but he's always been accountable and honest, and those to me are incredibly important qualities, and he always dealt with David and myself that way, and I want to thank you for that.
Yes, and on behalf of all the commissioners, thank you for coming here tonight. Thank you all for being willing to answer questions. And we welcome your coming to the commission with other things that you would like public input on.
Okay, great. And
Thank you.
can I leave my card with you, Tracy? Okay, thank you. We'll be on our way next month.
I'm going to do one more item of new business, and then we'll take a 10 or 15-minute break for those of you who wish to go in. We welcome all of you to stay. Maybe we should take the break now. 15-minute break.